What's going on? It's Stranger and welcome to another YouTube music production video where my mission is to help you succeed in making music. And today's topic has been much anticipated. We're going to be working on part 1 of drum and bass arrangement, particularly a minimal drum and bass track. However, what we're going to be learning today can be applied to pretty much any genre, especially in dance music. The concepts are universal. And I'm really proud of this project, and I almost don't want to give it away. However, I'm going to say if we can get it up to 1,000 likes, I'm going to give you guys the project for free. And if you haven't already, make sure you hit the subscribe button. And if you enjoyed the video, please share it. I'd really appreciate it. It'll help my channel grow. Now, before we jump into the project, it's important to understand a couple concepts regarding arrangement. Especially in dance music, there's different structures and formulas that you can follow to build your track. Now, contrary to negative stigma, it's actually not a bad thing to have a formula because it gives you something to build around and be really creative with. Let's use the analogy of painting. Your formula or structure is kind of like your canvas. If you don't have a canvas, then you can't paint. Likewise, if you don't have a basic structure to follow, then it's going to be really hard to arrange your song. Now, we're going to be going through one specific arrangement structure in dance music that's used a lot in drum and bass actually. However, there's tons of different structures and they are just building blocks and you can deviate from them to be really creative. Now, I'm going to call this the basic drum and bass structure. And it comprises of an intro, a body, a break, a second body, and an outro. The intro is where we establish some of these sounds and themes of the song. It's where we build tension. Also, the intro gives time for the DJ to mix in the track, so sometimes we find drums. As the intro builds energy and tension, it's then released in the body. Sometimes we call this the drop. The body is where the dancer bucks out, so this is why you'll find the drums and the bass playing through the body. The body also builds tension, and that tension is then released on the break. It's where the dancer gets to break. There's a feeling of release, kind of like when you're submerged in water and you finally get to breathe. And this break is usually executed by removing the drums and the bass. Tension builds again in the break, leading into the second drop or the body. And this is where the dancer gets to buck out again and the track develops. Finally, the outro is where certain elements are removed, usually the bass. The outro gives some space for the DJ to mix in the next track. Today, the outro is often omitted, as it's no longer required, thanks to the advent of digital DJing. Now, the body is comprised of smaller segments, which I call blocks, and you could have anywhere between 1 to 4 of these blocks, generally speaking. These blocks are usually 16 bars long. It's really important to get good at writing a 16-bar block because then it gets really easy to arrange the track. So this is where we'll be focusing today. Now within the block, you could yet again have smaller segments called phrases. The phrases can be arranged to create a smaller story within the track. A good 16-bar block should tell a story. There should be a feeling that a musical idea has completed when it reaches the end. One technique we can use to create this story is called the call and response. So now that we got the concepts down, let's get right into the project. So here's the project we're going to be working with, and we have a bunch of parts pre-written. There's a drum bus here. And within the drum bus, we have a kick, snare, hi-hat, some shakers, another shaker, some ride cymbals, and some wood percussion. Following the drums, we then have the main bass. And then I have some additional bass phrases that I wrote with some different presets. And we're going to be using this to create a call and response with the main bass. So here's a noise bass. And here's this gnarly bass. And then I made a second variation of the gnarly bass. And then I have a Reese. Finally, I have some sounds to help build the story of the track. I have a pad. Some stabs. And then some atmospheric sounds. Okay, so we're going to be focusing on writing the 16-bar block today. So I'm going to copy the drums and main bass into the arrangement view. Now I'm going to drop it here. Notice that I have these lines that indicate the sections of the basic drum and bass arrangement structure. And we'll be talking more about this in the next video. However, we're just going to focus on the 16-bar block here. So stretch the drums across the 16-bar block. Now let's listen to what we have. Notice that I wrote the main bass with a space in between each bar. This allows space for the response. So going back into the session view, I'm going to copy the gnarly bass and paste it as the first response. And then I'm going to fill the next response with the noise bass. Now I'm going to copy this 4-bar section all the way across our 16-bar block. Our story is starting to develop with the call and response between the main bass, the gnarly and noise bass. However, it's still sounding a bit repetitive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy the re section. Now notice it's a 2-bar phrase. So I'm going to copy it and paste it at the end of the 16-bar phrase here. Now I'm going to remove the main bass and the noise bass. Now let's listen to what we got. So our story is really starting to develop now with the Reese, and there's almost a feeling of musical completeness when the Reese plays out. We can also introduce the Reese at the end of the first 8 bars over here. Now I'm going to remove the other basses. Now to create more of a distinction when the Reese enters, I'm going to change up some of the percussion. Specifically, I'm only going to introduce the ride during the Reese section. And I'm going to remove the shakers. And for the last 2 bars, to create more of an emphasis on the Reese, I'm going to remove the shakers and the ride. And then I'm going to introduce a riser at the end of the 16 to really seal the deal. So this is what we got. And then I'll make one final change. I'm going to alternate between the gnarly 1 and gnarly 2 so there's a little more variation through the sequence. Now let's listen to what we got. Notice how there's almost a musical completeness at the end of the 16, and creating some emphasis at the very end with the reese and riser and taking out some of that percussion really helps seal that deal. So now that we have a strong 16 bar sequence, which I like to call a block, it then becomes really easy when we move on to the arrangement stage. So make sure you stick around for the next video where we use this block to then arrange our entire track. And I want you guys to get really good at writing a 16 bar block. The goal here is to have some musical completeness within that block. And remember the tools that we can employ to tell that story, such as the call and response between different bass sounds, removing certain sounds at the end of the 8 and 16 to emphasize the end. And remember, these are just tools and guidelines to be creative with. These rules can always be bent. And there's tons of different other methods we can use. For example, there's the triple call and response. And there's other subtle techniques where we can create movement within one bass patch. However, this is just one technique you can use to write that story. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe and share the video. It really helped me out and helped the channel grow. So that's pretty much it for today, guys. Thanks for watching. Keep practicing. I'll see you at the next video.